Hey guys, Luke back here on Sean's channel. Today I'm going to be bringing you guys my Blue Eyes Invoked deck. The new Blue Eyes structure deck came out. It provided some great cards for the Blue Eyes archetype. It is definitely a very good pure deck. However, I want to try a few variations. So one variation I decided to try out was Invoked. I really liked Invoked. I played Invoked Dolls for a little bit back when they were popular. I really like the Invoked archetype. I think it's really cool and very easy archetype to get to know. So I decided to try my hand at involving it in Blue Eyes and just seeing what happens. I think the deck is pretty good, to be quite honest with you. I really don't think it is the strongest variant of Blue Eyes White Dragon that you can play. Definitely stronger versions like Buster Blader or even Pure or Primite, of course, is probably the best version to play, but I still think this is a nice, fun sort of Blue Eyes variant that we should get into. So without further ado, this is the deck. Starting things off, we only run 2 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon. We're no longer blind by tradition or bound to the truth anymore. 2 Blue Eyes is the most optimal, although I would love to be playing it at 3 copies for Kaiba Boy. I'm afraid it's just not optimal anymore. It can be a brick. You can get these into the graveyard as quickly as possible, which is something you really want to do. It's not necessarily a good thing to have this in your hand at all, to be quite honest with you. You kind of want him in the graveyard as soon as possible so you're able to trick him out with the likes of True Light and stuff like that. So it's just not optimal anymore to bring it at 3 copies. If you want to do it for the nostalgia factor, please go ahead. I respect the hell out of it. But just for this build right here, I think 2 copies is more than enough. Next up, we have 3 copies of Aleister the Invoker. As the meme goes, normal summon Aleister, then you get to add a copy of Invocation from your deck to your hand. Aleister is of course very important for this strategy because Aleister's name is specifically mentioned on the invoked fusion monsters such as Mechaba, so it is essential that you run it out of 3 copies. We of course are able to search this off of Magical Meltdown as well, which will make an appearance in a little bit. But one of the main reasons you run Aleister is because on normal summon, you're able to search your copy of Invocation, and then from there it's very easy to link Aleister for your Spirit with Eyes of Blue, and then that's just instant fodder to go for your Mechaba. So it's definitely really important to run it at 3. It is integral to the strategy. We run 3 copies of Sage with Eyes of Blue. Sage is important to run at 3 copies. What I really like about this and why I think it blends well with Invoked is because although we do heavily rely on the normal summon of Aleister, if we're able to link Aleister into Spirit with Eyes of Blue, we're able to search out Mausoleum of White. And Mausoleum of White allows us to do an additional normal summon of 1 level 1 light tuner in addition to our normal summon. So Aleister is going to be our first normal summon, but then we are open to a second normal summon of a level 1 light tuner if we have Mausoleum of White face on the field. And the next best normal summon is of course Sage with Eyes of Blue. When he's normal summoned, you're able to add 1 level 1 light tuner from your deck to your hand, which of course is great because as an extender you can search your Maiden of White, and then Maiden of White is able to discard herself for True Light, so it's very easy to get your combos to pop off. But not only that, of course, it's also important to note that he's able to search out other level 1 light tuners such as Effect Failure as well, so it's another good way of interruption. We don't use the second effect too often, so it's really not worth bearing the mention. But in case it does come up in situations, what he's able to do is discard this card and target 1 effect monster you control and send to the graveyard, and if you do, you're able to special summon 1 Blue Eyes monster from your deck, which is pretty great. If you want to get Blue Eyes onto the field as quickly as possible, that's one way to go about it, but I say 9 times out of 10 you're only going to be using his first effect to search out a level 1 light tuner. So 3 copies of Sage is of course essential to run at 3 copies in the deck. As previously mentioned, 3 copies of Maiden of White. She's integral to the strategy of Blue Eyes now. I'm pretty sure all Blue Eyes decks that I've seen have run 3 copies of her because she's extremely good because you're able to send her from your hand or field to the graveyard, and then you can place 1 True Light from your hand, deck, or graveyard face up in the spell and trap card zone. And True Light is a very powerful Blue Eyes trap that's able to special summon a Blue Eyes White Dragon from your hand or graveyard, or set a spell or trap directly from deck that specifically lists Blue Eyes White Dragon. So it's very important for that. But not only that, Maiden White has an effect in the graveyard that if you were able to special summon Blue Eyes White Dragon onto the field while she's in the grave, you're able to special summon her out. And as you know, she is a level 1 light tuner. So if you're able to special summon Blue Eyes and she brings herself out, that's just an instant level 9 Synchro, i.e. your Spirit Dragon, so it's integral to the strategy. 3 copies of Maiden is essential. Just as some additional engine, I like to run 2 Bystials in this, 1 Bystial Druiswurm and 1 Bystial Magnamhut. You guys already know what the Bystials do, so no point in me explaining what their effects are. I will say these guys mostly just work as extenders. Druiswurm is a good way to get a bit of removal, and Magnamhut is a good search for any dragon if you're able to pull their effects off. So I do think it's it's definitely worth running them in the build. Going into some hand traps now, 3 copies of Effect Veiler. Effect Veiler is, I think, the most essential one to be running in this deck, just because you're able to search it off with Sage. So 3 copies of Effect Veiler is of course very great. We also run 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. Not only is Droll great because it's a very good lingering effect that can really mess with your opponent, but also since he's a spellcaster monster that's level 1, if you get really bricked in your opening hand, what you're able to do is normal summon Droll and Lockbird and then link it away for Spirit with Eyes of Blue to get somewhat of your plays going. So I definitely think Droll is important around 3 copies. And then rounding off the monsters, 3 copies of Ash Blossom. We run 3 copies of Wishes for Eyes of Blue. This is a very good card because this is a searcher for the deck. You can discard 1 card and add 1 level 1 light tuner and 1 spell/trap card that mentions Blue White White Dragon from your deck to your hand, except for Wishes of Eyes of Blue, which is just a great way to essentially go +1. So something we love to see, especially the fact that we're able to set this off of True Light is very good also. But that's not all that Wishes can do. What Wishes can also do is that you can banish this card from the graveyard, then target 1 Blue Eyes White Dragon you control and equip 1 Blue Eyes monster from your extra deck to it as an equip spell. The reason why this is so excellent is because what you're able to do is equip one of your Blue Eyes White Dragons with Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. Because we're able to get Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon into the graveyard, then that's a good bit of protection for a targeted effect, which is handy because he's going to go to the graveyard if you're going to be using that Blue Eyes for a Synchro summon or a Link summon. But not only that, if we're able to equip a monster to a Blue Eyes, what we're able to do is very easily go into our Tyrant Dragon as well. So 3 copies of Wishes I find to be absolutely essential. I don't see a need to run it at any less. We have 1 copy of Roar of the Blue Eye Dragons. With this card, you're able to special summon in defense position 1 Blue Eyes monster from your deck, graveyard, or banishment. But if you control no Blue Eyes White Dragon, you can only special summon Blue Eyes White Dragon with this effect. This locks you into only special summoning dragon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of its turn. And although we run a few non-dragon monsters in the extra deck, 9 times out of 10 that really doesn't come up too often. Because really the only non-dragon monsters in the extra deck are the invoked monsters and SP, so we don't really mind that lock too much anyways. But not only that, this card also says that you can banish this card from the graveyard, then fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field, including a Blue Eyes monster. So that's another good way to fuse with this deck. Most of the time when you're using that effect, you're going into your Tyrant Dragon. We run 1 copy of Mausoleum of White. You're able to search this off of your Spirit with Eyes of Blue, which is integral to the combo because Mausoleum of White lets us during the main phase normal summon 1 level 1 light tuner in addition to our normal summon set, which as I mentioned before, it's integral to the strategy because with this deck you want to be normal summoning Aleister first, getting all your invocation stuff out of the way, end on at least a Mechaba, and then you start into your Blue Eyes plays. And the best way to go into your Blue Eyes plays is by normal summoning Sage and getting their effects and following that combo line, so you definitely do need the additional normal summon, so Mausoleum of White is extremely important. Final Blue Eyes spell, just a little bit of fun, is Ultimate Fusion. There's many different ways to bring out Tyrant Dragon, but in case we don't get there and then we're backs against the wall a little bit, Ultimate Fusion I find just be really good, bit of backup for us to go for it. You can replace this if you want, but I just like this as another low tech option because as I said, it's not the most competitive version of this deck. I just think it is good for a bit of fun. So 1 copy of Ultimate Fusion. We run 2 copies of Invocation. This is of course the fusion spell for the invoked side of this deck. We are able to search this after we normal summon Aleister. It's just a generic fusion card, but it has the effect that if you're fusion summoning an invoked fusion monster, using this card you can banish monsters from your field and or either player's graveyard as fusion material. Which is great because if you're able to activate Invocation and then banish one of your Aleisters, Invocation has another effect in the graveyard that if this is in your graveyard, you can target 1 banished Aleister the Invoker and shuffle that card into the deck, and shuffle this card into the deck, and if you do, you can add that copy of Aleister to your hand, which is great because we're able to set up Mechaba and then activate this invocation effect and get Aleister to our hand. That just means we have an instant monster negate, which I find to be really good. So 2 copies of Invocation I think is essential for the build. We also run 3 copies of Magical Meltdown. Magical Meltdown is great because when this card is activated, you can add 1 Aleister the Invoker from your deck to your hand, and also this protects the activation of cards and effects that fusion summon monsters, so Magical Meltdown is very handy for that. So 3 copies is all you need in the deck. 1 copy of 1 for 1. If we open a bunch of hand traps and need to get to our Blue Eyes engine as quickly as possible, 1 for 1 is just a really good way of doing that. Finally, rounding off the spell is Called by the Grave. This is just so we don't get interrupted. Going into the traps now, 1 copy of True Light. True Light is a continuous trap that you're able to get onto the field by discarding Maiden of White from your hand or field to the graveyard, and then you're able to activate this face up in your spell and trap card zone. True Light has 2 different effects, but you're going to activate one or the other per turn. First effect being that you can special summon 1 Blue Eyes White White Dragon from your hand or your graveyard, which is great because if you're going on the assumption that you use Maiden to get this card onto the field, then that means if you're able to special summon Blue Eyes from the graveyard, that Maiden's also able to come out from the grave too. But also the effect that you're able to set one spell or trap directly from your deck to specifically list Blue Eyes White Dragon, that's a great way to get your wishes or even your roar as well. So this card is obviously integral for the strategy. Definitely run it at 1 copy. I also like to run 1 copy of Majesty of White Dragons. You can show up to 3 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon in your hand, face up monster zone and or graveyard, and then destroy an equal number of cards your opponent controls. We of course only run 2 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon, so we're able to get 2 pops off of this card, which I just think is very good, and the fact we're able to set this off of True Light as well means that's a nice bit of interruption. We're able to get onto the field as quickly as possible. So definitely run it at 1 copy. And then finally rounding us off, 3 copies of Imperm. It's just an overall great hand trap. I definitely recommend it. It comes with the structure deck as well, so you have no excuse not to play it. Going into the extra deck now, we run 2 copies of Spirit with Eyes of Blue. This is just a fantastic Link 1 that came out in the structure deck that really elevated Blue Eyes to one of the top tiers of the format. You're able to go into them by using 1 level 4 or lower dragon or spellcaster monster. So this of course is great for any one of our Blue Eyes tuners, but also we can use Aleister the Invoker in order to go into him as well. That's why the synergy is so prominent with this deck. When this card is link summoned, you can take 1 Mausoleum of White from your deck and either add to your hand or send to the graveyard. Of course, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be adding that card to your hand. But that's not all Spirit with Eyes of Blue can do. You can also tribute this card and special summon 1 Blue Eyes monster from your hand or graveyard. But if you special summoned an effect monster from your graveyard by this effect, it cannot attack and its effects are negated. But that's fine. 9 times out of 10 you're only going to be using this to bring out a Blue Eyes White Dragon anyways, so that negation doesn't really come up. So 2 copies of Spirit with Eyes of Blue, definitely essential for the deck. 1 copy of Hieratic Seal of Heavenly Spheres, just a nice way to kind of interrupt your opponent, especially if we're going first. It's great that we're able to get a bounce on the field and also special summon a dragon monster. I always think Magnamhut is the best dragon monster to bring out off of Hieratic Seal, just because you could then activate Magnamhut's effect to search for a dragon during the end phase, so I definitely find it worth it. 1 copy of Heavenly Spheres, it's very good for the deck. Last link we run is SP Little Knight. I know it's a little cheap now that people are running SP in literally everything, but it's just a really good card. You might as well run it. We have space in the deck anyways, and Invocation doesn't lock us into fusion monsters like Branded Fusion does, so you might as well run some of the most powerful X-Deck monsters in the game. So 1 copy of SP I think is worth it. I also like to run 1 copy of number 38 Hope Harbinger. Granted, we don't run an awful lot of level 8s in the deck. We essentially just have the 2 Blue Eyes monsters. But if we know that our opponent's whole strategy relies on having 1 spell card resolving, Hope Harbinger can be a real menace in terms of dealing with that, because Hope Harbinger is able to, once per turn, when a spell card or effect is activated on the field, you can quick effect, negate the effect, and if you do, attach that card to this as material, which I just find quite good. So 1 copy of Hope Harbinger. We also run 3 copies of Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon. Spirit Dragon is great. You just need 1 tuner and 1 non-tuner Blue Eyes monster in order to go into him. Has the effect that neither player can special summon 2 or more monsters at the same time. So as you know, this really messed up Pendulum back in 2016. But Spirit Dragon also has 2 other effects that make him really powerful and essential for the strategy. Because once per turn, when an effect of a card in the graveyard is activated, you're able to quick effect and negate the activation. And considering that in Yu-Gi-Oh now your graveyard is essentially your second hand, there's a lot of cards that are just activating the graveyard, so Spirit Dragon is a good negation right there. But not only that, it also has a quick effect that you can tribute this Synchro summon card and then special summon 1 light dragon Synchro monster from your extra deck in defense position, except for Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon, but destroy it during the end phase of this turn. Which I think is very great, because the card that we are going to be bringing out off of that effect is Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon. This is an absolute beast of a card. Has the lingering effect that your opponent cannot banish cards from your graveyard. But not only that, you can only use each of the following effects of Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon once per turn. When a card or effect is activated on the field, you can quick effect, negate the activation, and if you do, this card gains 1000 attack until the end of this turn. And then if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon 1 light dragon monster from your graveyard, except for Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon, which is great recursion. You're able to bring back monsters such as your Blue Eyes White Dragon, so that during the next turn you can extend your plays even further. So I definitely think it's worth it to run it at least 2 in the deck. Moving on to fusions now, we run a relatively small Invoked package. We run 2 copies of Invoked Mechaba and 1 copy of Invoked Augoeides. Invoked Mechaba is definitely the stronger monster in my opinion, just because he's easier to go into. All you need is Aleister the Invoker and 1 light light monster, which of course most of the monsters in our main deck are light monsters, so it's a lot easier to go into Mechaba. Has the effect of once per turn when spell, trap card, or monster effect is activated, you can quick effect send the same type of card from your hand to the graveyard, negate the activation, and if you do, banish the card. So that's fantastic. As I said, Invocation has that graveyard effect. You're able to add a banished Aleister from your banishment to your hand to shuffle Invocation back into the deck. So if you have Mechaba on the field when you have that effect go off, that means you have Aleister back in your hand, so you instantly have a monster negate right then and there. So I definitely think Mechaba is more important, so that's why I run him at 2 copies. But Augoeides is still quite good. You need Aleister the Invoker and 1 fusion monster in order to go into him. And then if this card is special summoned or a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls and destroy it. But not only that, once per turn you can banish 1 fusion monster from your graveyard, and then this card gains attack equal to the banished monster attack until the end of your opponent's turn. Which is really great because if you're able to banish Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon from your graveyard, that means Augoeides is able to go up to 6500 attack, which can pretty much mill out most monsters in the game. So that could be a very good game ender right there. As I said, the Invoked engine is very small. I didn't want it to be completely overshadowing Blue Eyes because at the end of the day I still wanted this to be a Blue Eyes deck. But I just found it a nice tech option. So I'd still like to reiterate, this is not the most powerful version of this deck, but it's still a fun way to play. So that's the Invoked package right there. Then of course our 2 Blue Eyes fusion monsters, Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon and Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon. Tyrant is the better card because it must first be either fusion summoned or special summoned from your extra deck by tributing 1 Blue Eyes White Dragon equipped with a fusion monster. Considering that Wish is able to equip a fusion monster to a Blue Eyes White Dragon on the field, it's now easier than ever before to bring a Tyrant Dragon. Tyrant Dragon is unaffected by trap cards or effects, and also it can attack all monsters that your opponent controls once each. And then once per turn at the end of the damage step, if this card battles, you can target 1 trap in your graveyard and set it to your spell and trap card zone. This is great for a number of reasons, because Tyrant Dragon has 3400 attack, so it's able to get over a lot of different monsters because it is very powerful. But also we run some pretty essential traps in the deck that could be really good to reset, such as the Majesty's card and also Imperm as well. So being able to recycle those, I find to be really good. Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, you don't really go into him at all. You need 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons in order to go into him. Of course, you're only run 2. So he's pretty much just used for fodder to use him to equip to a Blue Eyes White Dragon using wishes to bring out your Tyrant Dragon, or to banish him from the graveyard to use Augoeides effect to make Augoeides go up to 6500 attack. Unfortunately, I didn't build this deck to be able to just go into Ultimate Dragon and then attack in for game like what Blue Eyes used to be like, but I still think he's an essential part of the strategy, so you do definitely need to run a 1 copy. Going into the side deck now, 3 copies of Nibiru. Nibiru came with a structure deck, so no excuse not to run it. There's a lot of combo decks in the meta, so I think Nibiru is a good way of combating those. So having it at 3 in the side, I think is just really good to have. 3 copies of Artifact Lancia. Malice is a menace in the meta right now, so if we're able to stop their main gimmick of banishing cards in order to get their effects to pop off, we definitely want to do it as quickly as possible. So Lancia is essential for doing that. In case we're going second or we're going against some back row decks, I like to have 2 copies of Lightning Storm and 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster. This is just a nice duo to have in most side decks anyways, so I definitely recommend you run it for this one too. Because it's Blue Eyes and there's a lot of nostalgia around it, I like having some old school cards in the side deck to run alongside it, so I think 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. It might be nostalgic talking, but I still find this card to be really powerful and very relevant for today's meta, so 3 copies of Judgment in the side deck. And sticking with the Nope cards, 3 copies of Solemn Strike. Strike is actually pretty prevalent, you see it in most side decks now, it's just that powerful of a card, so I definitely think it's worth the run. So having 3 copies of Strike is going to round off the side deck. So that about does it for a deck. Please let me know what you guys think. I'm really happy with this deck turned out. Again, I'd like to reiterate, this is not the most powerful version of the deck that you can build. Pure Blue Eyes Buster Blader, or Prime Eye Blue Eyes are definitely the top version of the deck that I think have a lot more meta contention. But if we're just looking for a little bit of fun and also a bit more budget friendly than the likes of Primite, I think Invoked Blue Eyes is a fun way to take this deck. I just have a soft spot for Invoked. I had a lot of fun with it when I was playing Invoked Shaddolls, but unfortunately that got really power crept, so there's not really a good way to play it in today's meta. But considering the power of the Blue Eyes monsters now, I think it just has a bit more contention. If you guys are interested in making this deck, please consider using the TCG Player affiliate link in the description below, because if you build this deck using that affiliate link, you help directly support the channel so that Sean and I can bring you guys more interesting decks like this and help us keep up with the content. Other ways to help out the channel is if you guys consider becoming a member. A big shout out to our member Kieran Thompson. We really appreciate your continued support for this channel. It really helps motivate myself and Sean to keep bringing you guys these videos. But for everyone else, please make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment as well to let me know your favorite version of the Blue Eyes decks that you guys been experimenting with, or if you tried this version, let me know how you guys got on. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.